I want to be sure that I am very, very clear about what I intended this morning. You guys obviously liked the video a lot this morning where I talked about Tesla at 1200. And wouldn't we all like to see that come and get it day? Well, let me talk a little bit more. First of all, what I was trying to say, to be very, very clear, is that is what, to me, Tesla is worth at exactly this moment, right now, today, not $200 or 210 or to whatever. No, that is what I think Tesla is worth right now, but only by comparison to Rivian when it was valued at $100 billion when they had nothing. So in other words, it was to say, look, there is an investor out there. There is an investment community out there. There are people that are, institutional investors who will take that kind of bet. That's what I was trying to say. They take that kind of bet all the time. And they go, wow, we want to get the next Tesla or whatever. And they'll put that kind of a bet on something and drive the price crazy. It's not just retail investors. That includes institutionals. So the kind of bet that I'm talking about is not nearly as crazy as the bet that people were putting on Rivian. You've got actual product, you've got you have a CEO that's actually performed, and you've got a TAM that is multiples of the TAM that Rivian had. All right, so what about what is my real case? What do I really think is going to happen? What do I really think that you and the investing public will be doing with Tesla over the next few months? Here's how I see it rolling out. I believe that we will hit that number when things sink in with regard to Robotaxi and Optimus. And here's kind of the process that I see playing out. Now, there's so much news that could happen between now and then in terms of the cars, in terms of energy, in terms of new plants. I mean, there's millions of things, but I'm just going to go off of those two products, okay? Robotaxi and Optimus. First of all, on October 9th, if FSD is complete, but not level 5, so in other words, you got reverse, you can make K turns and Y turns and all kinds of different turns. You can park, et cetera, et cetera. So it's complete. It's not level 5. It's just FSD complete. I think we'll be around 265 or so just before the meeting. Okay, that's my thinking. Could be more, could be less, but that's what I think. On October 11th, the day after the meeting, if the meeting goes well, then we're going to be back to 300 within a few days or a week or so. All right. If it doesn't go well, you know how that can work. It might go down 3% or 5%, and then it'll go back up 10%, and we'll still get to that 300 eventually, but it might take 2 or 3 weeks, in my opinion. Now then, sometime between that October 10th date and the end of the year, if it hasn't already happened by October 10, we will get the official announcement that the product is level 5. Now, maybe it'll be the first quarter. Larry thinks it might be the second quarter, third quarter. I think it's going to be between now and the end of the year, maybe splashing over into next year. But we get the level 5 announcement, then the stock is going to do a lot better. Then we might be looking, well, okay, so the number that I figure is that we get that announcement, the stock goes to 700 in a week or so. Yeah, from 300 and change to 700 in no time. It will be the NVIDIA moment. It'll be the ChatGPT moment. It'll be the moment that we had in 2020. Yeah, it'll go crazy. The stock will go nuts when Elon announces that you can drive it from the back seat, because he'll be basically saying not only is FSD capable of that kind of capability, but it's also going to be Robotaxi ready. It's just a matter of moments before Robotaxi is released. So I'm going to say around 700, and it won't take long to get there. Now, when Elon actually, and it may be a separate day and maybe the same day, but when he actually says, okay, all you guys who own your Teslas out there, get your app. You can see it right there. It says, send your car out into LA or New York or Austin or wherever it is. Push that button and open the garage door, and your car will take off and go and join the fleet. When he does that, the stock goes to 900. Now, why doesn't it go up a lot more? Well, because it's already gone to 700 based on FSD. Now, if it's FSD and, being 100%, robotaxi ready, and he also says it's ready, they're ready to go into the fleet, start operating, it might go from the 300 or so up to 900 all at once. But I'm saying these might be 2 different days. That's all I'm saying. All right. Now, once that happens, once the cars are released and they're out there and they're starting to make money for people, then we're going to have some annoying ups and downs. We're going to have some volatility in the stock because people will be waiting for a lot of different things to happen with regard to those vehicles out there. There would be, okay, is it legal everywhere? Okay, are people saying, well, I put my car out and I'm not getting any money? Are there cars that are getting into accidents? Are there cars that are getting stuck on dead end roads? And there'll be these kind of headlines, and the stock will, we might be floating right back and forth between 600 and 1,000. We might be all over the place, depending on the news as it comes in. Now, at the point where that settles down, and we start to see that, in fact, people are using the system, and in fact, people are willing to put their cars out into the fleet. And we see that people are starting to report that they're making $30 a day or $50 a day or $3,000 a month or whatever the numbers are. And that starts to filter back. Well, then I say the stock goes to 1,200. Okay, maybe it'll be March, maybe it'll be February, March, April. I don't know how long. Let's call it 3 months after the robotaxi fleet starts, somewhere within that 90 days. I think things will settle out, and the stock, assuming people are making money and assuming it's doing well, the stock will go to 1,200. Now, all along this entire time, there could be optimist noise. In particular, I'd be looking for Optimus to have a voice from Grok. And I think Optimus needs to work at human speed on multiple tasks in the factory. So we can see a video of that. We can see a video in January. We can see that video in March. Maybe it's April. Maybe we see a video soon with the voice. We don't see it working in factories until April. I don't know, but there's going to come these times, okay? And as Optimus becomes more obviously workable, more obviously something that's ready to go, then I think the stock goes up to 1,500. Well, okay, well, you say only 1,500. Yeah, that'll be while it's still working in the Tesla factory. Okay, so that's not production yet. It'll be kind of a initial production on a small scale. But I think it goes to 1,500. I mean, that's $300 is a hundred. $300 is 100 billion in value. So it's not wait, $300 is $1 trillion in value. So it's not trivial. Okay, but it's not 10 trillion in value. Okay, so then that's kind of how I see it playing out next year. That's over the next 18 months. It may take all 18, it may take until the end of next year before all of those things come true. But I'm saying that's kind of how things go along next year. You can write it down. You can bookmark this video. You can send me, put it in your calendar for next, October or something. Anyway, but that's how I see it. All right. So somebody this was at the Wall Street Journal. Somebody wrote this article for the Wall Street Journal a week of relying on a new class of family-sized electric vehicles taught this guy a revealing lesson. A lot of us are all wrong in how we think about electric vehicles and charging. The narrative for us has gone something like this: EV adoption will remain inconvenient and incremental until America has an adequate away-from-home charging infrastructure, including a great many fast chargers capable of filling up our vehicles and not much more than it would take at a gas station. Without such a network, range anxiety and America's culture of road trips, super commuting, and endless errands will make EVs a non-starter for many people. Well, I know this logic well because I've articulated this myself, says the writer. He's actually been saying this kind of FUD. Well, then he opted to test a Kia EV9 for a week. This required charging a vehicle with a nearly 100 kilowatt hour battery, twice the size and not quite, but substantially larger than a Tesla Model 3, from a conventional indoor home outlet that usually isn't handling anything more intense than a string of Christmas lights. The surprise was that for 7 days of errands, pickups, and even a lengthy road trip, being limited to charging at the lowest, slowest possible rate was just fine. And my ability to fast charge away from home was a non-issue. I knew the surveys show EV fans generally love the experience of charging their vehicle at home as long as they pay hundreds of dollars for a dedicated level 2 fast charger and more to have it installed. Well, we've had our car for 3.5 years, almost 4 years now. We don't have the level 2 fast charger. It takes care of all of our needs just fine. 5 miles an hour of charging. So 12 hours, 60 miles, that's plenty. And usually we get more than 12 hours of time to charge it up. The fact that I didn't need such a fast home charger at all was a minor revelation. It has fundamentally changed my view of the prospects of EV adoption in the US. In particular, what made my week of EV use possible was the relatively high real-world efficiency of this vehicle, measured by how many miles it could travel for every unit of charge I put it in. The efficiency is a feature of many new EVs, and especially surprising given the fact that EV9 has the dimensions and rough outline of a Chevy Suburban. Well, this was true even on days when I was clocking upwards of 30 miles. Combine that with the EV9's relatively large battery pack, another increasingly standard feature of EVs, and it meant that I had more than adequate buffer of range for days when I wanted to go further, as I did when I went for a trip to the beach. All this is due to a long string of incremental improvements to the tech. Collectively, these innovations improvement means that it's now possible for millions of Americans to slot an EV into our lives with little more than an extension cord. One thing that's important to note, while online forums are full of people who have been just fine with level 1 charging at home, some vehicles have trouble with it, really. I don't know about that. I've never heard of anybody, not a single soul. The average American travels more than 40 miles a day, according to one estimate, but that varies a great deal, with many commuters driving less and a small number driving far more. Based on conversations with experts on EV adoption and range, my experience isn't typical. Well, yes, 40 miles a day would still be plenty easy. If you're going an hour a day in commute, most people, kind of the limit, I've studied this years ago because I was all involved in transportation issues in Los Angeles about 100 years ago. Anyway, when there was a diamond lane on the Santa Monica Freeway, I could tell you that story sometime. But anyway, it turns out that most people, if it's more than a 45-minute commute, that's out. It ain't going to happen. So a 45-minute commute in most areas of any city, a 45-minute commute is going to be maybe 30 miles each way. So top, people are doing 60 miles. Well, if you're doing 60 miles and you get home at 6:30 at night and you leave at 6:30 the next morning, you can charge almost 60 miles in that time. Put simply, the driving patterns of most Americans mean that most of us will rarely exceed the range of today's modern long-range vehicles. As Ford CEO Jim Farley, a self-confessed petrolhead who now makes EVs almost barely. Our research shows that roughly half of Americans take trips over 150 miles merely 4 days a year. This means that as long as someone can charge a vehicle at home and they're not a super commuter, the state of America's charging infrastructure isn't a big impediment, other than the ones that don't work. Anyway, which are not Teslas, of course. Since 60% of Americans live in detached family homes, many of whom could at least run an extension cord, as the EV driving neighbors in my garageless village in Maryland do. That means a significant proportion of us could switch to charging an EV at home with less fuss. I have a friend of mine who has a hybrid, and they have an extension cord coming out of their garage because they've already got 2 other cars in the garage. For his experiment, he parked the key in the driveway alongside my house, and attached the charging cord that comes with the vehicle to a standard extension cord that reached the outlet by my front door. When I first plugged in after a late long trip during which I almost completely discharged the battery, the vehicle helpfully informed me that it would only take 70 hours to fully recharge at the paltry rate of my standard 120-volt outlet. This seemed like a disaster, but as the week unfolded, it didn't make a bit of difference because it could charge up enough. Anyway, keep in mind that I had hooked the vehicle up to a home level 2 charger. If he had gotten a home level 2 charger, it would have charged 6 times as fast. And there you go. All right. So then he goes on to prices. He says currently 9% of new vehicles purchased in the U.S. are electric. The proportion of the nation's total fleet that is electric, obviously much smaller so far. Many potential buyers simply don't know what they don't know about EVs. According to the executive director of J.D. Power's electric vehicle practice, Brent Gruber, range anxiety is hardly the only issue. Perhaps the biggest barrier historically has been the price, and the EV premium in some cases is smaller than ever, according to J.D. Power. Buyers will pay about $1,500 more for a non-luxury EV than its standard gas-powered equivalent. Some EVs are even cheaper, especially if you get the $7,500 off, or in some states a lot more. Anyway, and then those price comparisons, we all know this doesn't include the fact that you never, ever, ever have to have anything done to the car. When Americans buy vehicles, we tend to think of the fringe use cases for them, says Gruber, like those few days a year we take our vehicle on vacation. But if you take a Tesla on vacation, as all of you know, it's fine. People buy based on aspirations, sometimes things that they want to do or things they think they're going to do, and that manifests itself with range anxiety, he adds. Ultimately, this guy says that his biggest takeaway from his week was that it's time for more of us to start thinking EVs like we think of other battery-powered gadgets. Sure, some of us need to fast charge our phones and our vehicles to get through a day, but given typical driving patterns, even something as thirsty for energy as a vehicle doesn't require any more infrastructure at home than what's needed to charge a phone. All right, well, this is Randy Kirk. Have you hit the like button yet? How about the subscribe button? You know what's coming up? Oh, tomorrow I'm going to do a story on how will Tesla do in the unlikely case that Kamala is elected. What effect would that have? And then later in the afternoon, and there'll probably be something else later in the afternoon. But finally, at the end of the day, what will we have? Oh, yeah, we'll have Monday morning, which is on Sunday night, and we'll talk about all the stuff that's coming next week. It's not a busy week, but I think you'll find that it's a very interesting show because the things that are going to happen next week. Okay. My sense, according to this article, is that the optimism, this is me actually speaking, not any article. I should really have better, some way, like in blue or something. My sense right now is that the optimism on Wall Street is kind of out of control. I really believe this. There are a few realists who are actually weighing the good versus the bad news and seeing more of the latter, but overall, it seems like we could get a big, shocking surprise, and it might come on September 6th. That is Employment Day. We could see downward revisions. We could see an increase from 4.3 to 4.4, but we could see a decrease from 4.3 to 4.1. I maintain my claim that there's a lot of fat in companies in terms of employees. They have enough business to justify hanging on to those seemingly hard to replace employees. And to be fair, the ones they currently have on the job are probably a lot better than the ones that they could hire right now because it's still a little thin out there. And the new people that are coming into the workforce, a lot of people are saying, Gen Z, not so great. But then they say that about every generation. They might have even said it about baby boomers. I don't know. Cisco had a great quarter and good guidance, rather. But they laid off 8%. Now, that's just one single data point, but could it be part of a trend? We've had three Thursday first-time unemployment. Between now and when the Fed makes their decision whether they're going to raise or lower interest rates, we will have 3 Thursday first-time unemployment reports, and then we'll have an ADP numbers. And then if you're interested in keeping track, keep joining me each morning and evening, and I'll keep you informed about all this labor stuff. We could see a Fed shock. They could shock the market and not lower rates if those next 3 Thursdays are flat and the unemployment rate comes in at 4.1 or even 4.2, or maybe even if it's flat at 4.3. Now, if it's 4.4, I think it's a done deal. If it's 4.3, it might be. But that also depends on what? Well, we have a CPI number coming in. It's going to be the same day as the meeting opens on September 11th. In addition to those numbers, leading up to the Fed meeting, we'll have the PCE on the 29th, the GDP revision on the 29th, and the Beige Book on the 4th. So what happens if the revision revises and says that I'm right, that Randy is right again about the economy, and that the second quarter wasn't quite as good as the first report says it was? Or what if the Beige Book comes in on the 4th and the Beige Book says, the third quarter is now looking like it's only going to be up 0.5%, or maybe it's going to be flat, or maybe it's going to be down. So much could happen that would keep the Fed at the current levels. And especially if those numbers came in, if the Beige Book comes in and says we're still looking at 1.8 or something for the third quarter, and if the revision on the GDP comes in and says no, things are still fine. So much could happen. There's just so much going on between now and then. Well, you know what? We're going to see what we're going to see. We got about 3.5 weeks before the Fed has their meeting. Well, political news is definitely crowding out all the other news, so not actually any news about Tesla today that I could find. I looked everywhere. Maybe you could let me know in the comments below if you saw something newsworthy. I'll report it tomorrow. Anyway, if you didn't see this morning's video where I talked about the $1,200 price point in detail, I gave you a little bit of a rehash here, but I gave you the details of how I got to that number. I'll put that card right up here. In the meantime, you could, of course, participate in Patreon and help me make sense of all the time that I put into this effort. It's been great talking to you as always.